Justice Earl, so good to see you. This is Senator Applewhite. How are you?
Doing well. It's good to see everyone here.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to see everybody.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon.
So I'm going to kick it off and get this meeting started, and I appreciate everybody being here today. My name is William Laster. Everybody calls me Billy, so you can call me Billy. Billy Laster, and I am the Deputy Secretary for the Department of Public Safety over Juvenile Justice, and I'm really excited to have all of you join us today for today's meeting. We're going to have a panel discussion today on safe storage of firearms. And I'm really fortunate to be joined by some outstanding panelists today, and I'm excited that they can all join us. And I know all these people personally, and I consider them good friends, and so I'm glad that they could all join us for this conversation. I'm going to introduce them, and then I'm going to give a quick overview of safe storage in the state of North Carolina, where we are, and then we'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more after that point. And tell you a little bit about themselves. And so just real quick, we've got Sheriff Danny Rogers here today. He is the Sheriff of Guilford County. He actually serves on the Safer Schools Task Force with me also, and has been a real advocate for youth violence prevention initiatives across the state of North Carolina. Before becoming sheriff, he actually had a private business that he worked in, but he also worked with the sheriff's office before that, worked with the High Point Police Department, and also with the Guilford County Sheriff's Department before he became sheriff. And also we have Fawn Dockery today. Fawn Dockery, I've met over the last year, and as we've been working on this NC Safe campaign, and has become a real friend of mine. He is a father of a beautiful young lady that unfortunately was lost to gun violence, and he can tell you more about his story in a few minutes, but he's taken that tragedy and turned it into trying to do good for his community. He has started a project called the Live Like Genesis Project, and the Live Like Genesis Project, he'll tell you more about as we go through the presentation today, but just a outstanding advocate for this issue of safe storage. Has actually worked on a law. I know he's worked on some legislation with Senator Applewhite, who I'll introduce in just a second, called Genesis Law, that would really focus on making sure that gun owners are held responsible for safe storage in their homes. The young man that actually took Genesis' life was 12 years old and was the son of a babysitter who got access to a firearm in the house while Genesis was over at her house being babysat. And so he'll tell you more about his story in a few minutes and what inspired him to get involved in this cause. We've also got Mark Gooden today, and I've met Mark actually through the Live Like Genesis project. He works in Cumberland County and has been working on prevention efforts, injury prevention efforts, and community outreach as a coordinator of the trauma services at Cape Fear Valley Health Services in Fayetteville, North Carolina, combining his years of paramedic work and experience in his passion with community safety. He leads trauma education initiatives such as Stop the Bleed, gun violence prevention. Through his work, Mark is dedicated and has built a safer community for building a safer community and educating our young people about injury prevention and their parents. And then I've got Senator Applewhite. As I mentioned earlier, Senator Applewhite is just got reelected to her second term. Congratulations, Senator.
Yay.
And so she represents Cumberland County. And before that, she was on the Fayetteville City Council and is also a retired Air Force veteran. So happy Veterans Day, and thank you for your service, Senator, over the years with the Air Force. So, like I said, I'm going to let them introduce themselves more in a few minutes, and we'll jump right into the panel discussion after I give everybody I wanted to level set the issue for everybody, where we are in the state of North Carolina as far as safe storage. And so I'm going to do a quick presentation that kind of tells you where we are and some of the statistics that we've seen across the state as far as safe storage. And so I'm going to share my screen real quick with y'all. Okay, everybody can see that, hopefully?
Looks good, Billy.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And so wanted to tell you a little bit about a new campaign that we've started in the state of North Carolina that's called NC Safe, which stands for Secure All Firearms Effectively. This is a campaign that's almost 2 years old now, that we've been working with the governor's office, also with the Department of Health and Human Services, DPI, the Attorney General's office. So this is a whole community effort that we've been working on to really focus on safe storage of firearms across the state of North Carolina. And why are we doing that? Let's see if I can get slides to advance. Okay, so this is some data that I wanted to point out to you that kind of shows you what we're looking at as far as the data as far as safe storage and why this is an important issue. So the two lines that you see here, the light blue line is the number of young people under the age of 19 that have been killed due to firearm-related deaths. And then the red line, the blue line is motor vehicle deaths, and the red line is firearm deaths. So motor vehicle deaths, as you can see, have been consistently going downhill in the number of young people that have died due to motor vehicle deaths. Why is that? Because we put in so many safety factors in vehicles. I remember when I was a kid, many of us probably remember that a lot of us didn't have to wear seatbelts. We didn't have to, sometimes you saw kids that rode in the back of pickup trucks and those types of things. Think about all the safety features that we've put in place in vehicles over the last 2 decades that have really changed the dynamics and reduce the number of motor vehicle deaths among young people. The red line here being firearm deaths has been increasing over that same time period. And we really saw that after the pandemic, a large increase in the number of firearm-related deaths among kids under the age of 19. So I wanted to really show you this, how it kind of breaks down, because I think one of the thoughts that most people have is that most firearm deaths to young people are homicides. And the reality is that suicide is actually more common among young people with firearm-related deaths than it is for homicides. So the red line there being homicides, the gray line being suicides. And so one of the things that we really want to emphasize to people, a lot of people go out and buy a firearm for protection of their home, and don't realize that thing that they use for protection of their home can often end up harming somebody in their home. And so those suicides have been on the increase among young people, and firearms are the most common way that kids commit suicide and the most effective way, meaning that 95% of the time when a kid tries to commit suicide with a firearm, they're successful, versus all other means that kids try to commit suicide with are only about 50% effective. And so that's one of the things that we were really highlighting in this campaign, is that we want to focus on not just homicides, but also preventing suicides among young people. And we know firearms are the way that kids often are successful in doing that. So if you look at the rate per 100,000 kids in the state of North Carolina, you can see the red line there is North Carolina's rate. The blue line is the national rate of firearm-related deaths and mortality among kids between the ages of 0 and 17 in the state of North Carolina versus nationally. And you can see for most of the time period, we were going along about the same percentage or same rate as the national average. Then all of a sudden, the pandemic hit in 2019, 2020, and you can see that North Carolina's rate skyrocketed. The national rate also went up, but the North Carolina rate went up significantly more than the national rate, 231% increase from 2012 to 2021. And so not only did the rate of homicides and deaths increase, but you can also see down there in the statistic that child firearm injuries that caused a kid to go to the hospital also increased 120%. So it's not just the kids that die because of firearms, but we have lots of young people that get injured by a firearm-related injury, and the trauma that causes for the rest of their life. You can imagine that those numbers have also increased. And so these are all data that we really want to focus on in trying to reduce the number of young people that become victims of either injury-related deaths or just injuries that lead them to the hospital because of a firearm in their community. And here's some of the other data that we just wanted to point out to folks. More than half of homes in the state of North Carolina do own a firearm. Actually, 42% of those own a firearm. And most of those people admit that they do not lock up or safely store that firearm in their house. And so what we really want to focus on with this campaign is trying to get those people that possess firearms, that own firearms, that have the right to do that in our society. We want to make sure that they're responsibly owning that firearm. And responsible firearm ownership starts with safe storage. Safe storage is really about making sure that young people and criminals in your community that aren't supposed to have firearms do not gain access to your firearm and steal it in your community. So you can see some of the other data there that I think is really important when we look at school-related violence that occurs in our schools across the state of North Carolina, but also nationally. If you look at the active shooters that occur on school campuses, the majority of those guns come from the kid's own home. They don't steal it, they don't buy it, they actually take it from their own parents in their own home. And so that is why this is a really important issue, to make sure that parents understand they have a responsibility to make sure that their kids don't end up with that firearm and using it to terrorize a school or a community in the state of North Carolina. So one of the things that we do every 2 years in the state of North Carolina is what's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We ask young people a number of different questions about health and violence-related issues on this Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And you can see on the survey, we asked young people last time in high school and in middle school, how quickly could you get a gun that's loaded and ready to use in less than an hour? And 30% of high school and middle school students in the state of North Carolina said that they could have access to a firearm within 1 hour without the permission of their parents. And so that's a disturbing statistic that almost a third of all kids in the state of North Carolina that are in middle school and high school said that they could do this. And so one of the things that we know that leads to that access is that young people, that those guns are not locked up in young people's homes. This heat map, I think, is really important because I think a lot of people think that this is just an urban issue. And so this is a heat map that shows you where we're seeing the most juvenile activity that involves firearms in the state of North Carolina. And so the darker the red, the more likely that you're having incidents of young people possessing or using guns illegally in their community. The darker the green, the less likely it is in your community. And so you can see some of the communities that you may not expect would have higher rates are those communities that do. So a lot of these are rural communities across the state of North Carolina that are having higher rates of juveniles using guns to commit criminal acts in their local communities. And some of the more urban areas are actually in the green. And so I just throw this map up there because I think that there's a misconception that this is just an urban problem, this is just a city problem. And in reality, we know that this is a problem that we're seeing across the state of North Carolina. And one child possessing a firearm that in the commission of a crime is one too many. And so we've really got to work on this access issue that we're having across the state of North Carolina. This next slide shows you the number of firearms that young people, the number of complaints, juvenile complaints that were filed against young people in the state of North Carolina for possession of firearms or other criminal acts that they committed with a firearm. And so the blue bar there shows you the actual number of complaints that were filed against juveniles. And the orange bar there shows you the number of juveniles that were involved in those incidents. And I just point out this data because if you look back to 2020, during the first year of the pandemic, we were looking at 2,337 incidents of gun-related crimes that were committed by juveniles. Last year, that was 5,593. So it's just a tremendous increase in the number of young people possessing firearms in the commission of crimes. And the reason why I point this data out to you is because the legal consequences for those young people is much greater when they use a firearm in the commission of a crime, but also the physical consequences to law enforcement and to the young person themselves are great when they're involving a firearm, because it's much more likely law enforcement is going to pull their gun if a young person also possesses that firearm or is using that firearm in the commission of a crime. And so this has led to obviously bigger problems that we're seeing with young people getting involved with the criminal justice system at a very young age, because when they possess that firearm, they're much more likely to get secure custody orders filed against them, that those petitions are more likely to be approved for court and head to court and have real long-term consequences for those young kids moving forward. And so we need to work on, as a state, if we want to look at how do we cut off some of this disproportionality, especially that we see in the racial disparities among young people that are coming into the juvenile justice system. We really need to look at this issue of how many are getting access to firearms, because that is one of those issues that really drives a kid deeper into the criminal justice system at a young age. Okay. And so this next slide kind of shows you what types of crimes we're talking about with firearms that juveniles are committing across the state. And you can see possession and carrying of a firearm is the #1 charge that kids face when it comes to gun possession. And so, this issue really intersects with the TREC, which is the committee that you guys are on that are part of this conversation today. The racial equity disparities that we see in the system, it intersects because a lot of the young people that are getting pushed into the system at a young age we know are African American youth. And by possessing that firearm, it definitely ups the chances that kid's going to go deeper into the system. And so you can see the different crimes that we're talking about. Most of these are for possession, robbery that occurs. Discharging of a firearm is also it's the third highest category there. And so but possession being the #1 issue that we're seeing. And then larceny of firearms is on the increase also. You can see that those blue bars there are the number of larceny complaints that are being filed against juveniles. So we had 476 incidents last year of juveniles stealing firearms. Typically, the most common place that they're stealing those guns from are vehicles. 60% of those complaints were from kids stealing guns from vehicles. And so you can see that number has consistently been going up over the last few years. And we do know that there are places in the state where one of the gang initiations that are done among young people is to ask them to go and try to steal a firearm. And so this ups the consequences for kids dramatically. One of the things that I can tell you from going around and looking at young people that are in our facilities in juvenile justice, that a huge portion of those kids that are in are detained in confinement are for weapon-related charges. And so as you can see, those numbers have increased, and that makes them much more at risk of being confined in the future. And then, so this one shows you where those larcenies are occurring most likely in communities across the state. So those darker blue colors show you where those larcenies are occurring. So our highest point in the whole state of North Carolina right now is Pitt County, but Cumberland and Wake County were pretty close right behind. But also some of our rural counties like Rockingham and Caswell County were also in those higher numbers. And I know we got the sheriff from Guilford County here today, and his numbers are a little lighter blue today. But 2 years ago, he was one of the darkest blues in the state. So we've seen some real progress in Guilford County in reducing those numbers of larcenies among juveniles stealing firearms in those local communities. And so the NC Safe campaign itself is a campaign that we're really trying to get the message across to the public about how important it is to lock up those firearms. There was legislation that passed bipartisanly in the General Assembly to work on the safe storage issue. And so we're doing a campaign that was required in that legislation. We're working with the General Assembly. Although they required the campaign, there was no funding that was made available as part of the campaign. So we've been using federal dollars to fund the campaign over the last 2 years, and we're hoping in the upcoming legislative session that the General Assembly will allocate recurring funds for the NC Safe campaign moving forward. So the campaign itself has been focused on community outreach events. We've been doing public service announcements and media engagement across the state of North Carolina. Lots of positive engagement across the state. The most recent numbers that I looked at was that we've reached over 5.5 million people already with the campaign. And we distribute gun locks as part of the campaign. So you can see we've done those ongoing support for local communities and cultivating unique opportunities to highlight the NC Safe campaign. We have weeks of action over the last couple of years where we've really been focused on this issue. We gave out 25,000 gun locks in the first year, and 200 gun vaults are safes that people can lock up their firearms in their vehicles that actually bolt down to the vehicle so that people can't easily steal those guns from vehicles. We got another 25,000 in and have already distributed those. We were at the NC State fair a couple weeks ago and gave out over 10,000 gun locks just at the fair alone. We were at the NC State Duke game this weekend and gave out several hundred more at those events. And so across the state so far, we've already given out 60,000 gun locks to citizens in the state of North Carolina. there's quite a demand when we go to events for the gun locks, but there's also a lot of demand for the information itself about how do I properly lock up my firearms. There's a lot of people in the public, especially at the NC State game this weekend, for example, we had a lot of young students that or people had just recently graduated from college that had just purchased their first firearm and were really interested in doing the right thing, and how do they properly store that firearm. So we've created videos. The North Carolina State Highway Patrol actually helped us develop a video to show people how to properly store those firearms, and we've got a QR code on the gun locks when we distribute them that people can see that video and walks them through the process. So right now we're really focused on vehicle firearm safety, making sure that people lock up those firearms. If they go in to their homes at night, they take the gun with them and lock up that firearm instead of leaving it in their vehicle overnight. One of the studies that we just recently looked at was that 60% of the guns that are stolen from vehicles were stolen from vehicles that are not even locked. The gun's not locked up in the vehicle, and the vehicle itself is not locked up. We're focused on suicide prevention this year, not just with young people, but also with adults. A lot of veterans, especially, we just celebrated Veterans Day yesterday, but veterans especially are subject to finding themselves that when they commit suicide using a firearm to do that with. So we're encouraging the loved ones of veterans to help them think through what are safe ways to store that firearm in the house. Because what we see is that if it takes someone more than 5 minutes to access that firearm, they're much more likely to rethink the decision of committing suicide. And so we really are focused on that suicide prevention initiative, but also with parents making sure that they understand that they need to lock up that firearm in their household. Evaluation of the effectiveness of the campaign, we're doing that with the Research Triangle Institute is doing an evaluation of the campaign, making sure that our marketing is going after the right people across the state. And this year, we're really focusing on making sure that we get the message out in schools. And we're doing that by putting the message in student handbooks, by giving principals messages that they can send home with their when they do their weekly messages to parents. And so that campaign just started a couple of weeks ago. We're really excited. We're partnering with school districts across the state of North Carolina to get this message across about why safe storage is important. As a part of that, we're also doing the EKG program, which is educating kids about gun violence and gangs. So they understand that, hey, this is not a video game. If you use a gun, that there's real life consequences associated with that firearm. So we've got all kinds of great resource guides through NC Safe that you can access. And so there's community resource tools. There are resource tools for parents across the state of North Carolina. They're both in English and in Spanish, so you can use these tools. We actually have PowerPoints that if you're interested in doing a PowerPoint in your local community, like to a Rotary Club or a PTA meeting, there's all kinds of free materials that are on the NC Safe website that people can access and use, and makes this really easy to help us spread the message. We're really excited to partner with DHHS on this. And we're working with our pediatricians across the state of North Carolina. So when parents go in for well check visits, they're providing gun locks to them and making sure that they have the resources necessary to make sure their kids are going to be safe by locking up those firearms. And so we're working with the pediatricians, but also with our social workers and law enforcement across the state of North Carolina to get this message across. Here's some of the other materials that are available on the website. So you can see we've got ones for parents, ones for pediatricians, ones for school resource officers that are all available on the website. These are all free to download and use if you'd like to help us spread the message in your local community about safe storage. And then there are the thicker toolkits that we provide to communities also that you can use to host an event in your local area. This is the front page of what the NC Safe website looks like. Here's a QR code that you can access. You can scan that code right there to get to the NC Safe website. But the website itself is just ncsafe.org to learn more about the campaign and what we're doing across the state of North Carolina to focus on safe storage of firearms in people's homes and in their vehicles. And so that's just kind of to level set where we are on safe storage. This is an extremely important issue. And as I said, it kind of intersects with what the TREC has been looking at over the last few years when it comes to racial equity in the criminal justice system, because we know that a lot of our young people that are entering the criminal justice system right now in the state of North Carolina, one of the charges that really ups that level of consequences for them is when they possess a firearm when they're committing those crimes. And we're just seeing that disparity grow across the state of North Carolina, with a lot of our young African American youth ending up in the criminal justice system because they are possessing those firearms. And so I think this is a extremely important topic. One, because we want to save our young people from the possibility of homicides or suicides in our communities, but also two, on the opposite side of that spectrum, making sure that our young people don't have access to those firearms so that they're not getting involved in the criminal justice system moving forward. And so I'm going to open it up now that we've kind of given that level set of the conversation, and we'll start the panel discussion. As I said, we've got Sheriff Rogers here today from the Guilford County Sheriff's Office. We've got Fawn Dockery here today with the Living Like Genesis Project. We've got Mark Gooden here today from the Cape Fear Community Outreach and the Trauma Services through Cape Fear Valley Health Services. And then we've got Senator Val Applewhite here today, who has been a veteran and also has been working on this issue, I know, of looking at safe storage in the General Assembly. So we're really excited to have the full panel here with us today. And so what I'm going to do is have each of y'all introduce yourself, and if you'll tell us why you think the safe storage issue is important to you in your local communities. And so I'm going to start with Sheriff Rogers. If you want to tell us, just introduce yourself a little bit, Sheriff Rogers, and tell us why you think this issue is an important issue in your local community.
Okay. Can you hear me? Make
Yes,
sure
sir.
I'm off mute. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say great PowerPoint presentation, Mr. Lassiter, real talk. My name is Sheriff Danny H. Rogers, or just Danny H. Rogers. I'm the Sheriff of Guilford County, and very honored to be here. Why is it important to me or to our county or the state for this safe lock program? You know, we've seen so many accidents, or we've seen so many guns stolen um, out of cars from these juveniles. And seem like the juvenile, the younger they come, the younger they are driving these cars and stealing guns. So we want to keep on pushing the fact of making sure that people lock their guns up, they store them in a safe place, and make sure that they understand juveniles can find anything they put out there. We just want to make sure that we do our part, teaming up with everybody and getting the word out and marketing it like we need to. So that's my piece. That's what I have, Mr. Lester. I have a personal piece that I want to tell, but I think I'm gonna let that go. But it's just one way right now. It's good about having guns locked up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sheriff. Fawn, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the Live Like Genesis project, and also why you, obviously, I think through that description of the project, you'll tell us why you think this is an important issue to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fawn Dockery. I am the father of Genesis Dockery, Amara Dockery. I always tell people prior to this, and you know, I wasn't in this fight. I didn't directly get in this fight, but because of the impact that directly happened to my family, we joined this fight. Our daughter loved others, and we, as a family, I was working with children before this through training, and we as a family decided that the right thing to do would be advocating for change, for the protection of the rest of the children, not just in our county, but in the 100 counties across the state. And through the Live Like Genesis project, we have successfully and wonderfully partnered with NC Safe, Mark Gooden, even Chef Rogers. We've been together with you and continue to push safe gun storage, children's mental health. And for us, that's one of the bigger things when we speak on the safe gun storage issue, the mental health end for youth, especially in the African American home. Also access to resources. So those reasons are why we believe, as the Live Like Genesis project, safe gun storage is important.
Thank you, Fawn. I appreciate that. Mark, Gooden, if you'll introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work in the Cumberland County community and how it interacts with safe storage and why you think safe storage is such an important issue.
Certainly, certainly. Thank you for having me, first of all. So again, my name is Mark Gooden. I'm the Injury Prevention and Community Outreach Coordinator for Trauma Services. Before this position, I spent 8 years as a paramedic on the ambulance here in this county. So I could say this, that I have seen firsthand the pain and the loss that ripples through these families and our community. I believe that safe storage is a powerful tool, and it's a way that we can keep our families safe. I believe that it's something that we can make a real difference in our homes and our friends' homes, our families' homes. I believe that every life matters. I believe that every life matters, and it's just a simple idea, a simple step that we can do to prevent tragedy. That drives us here today. So I'm really advocating for this awareness and the safety practices of safe storage.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And then Senator Applewhite, if you'll introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then what brings you to this issue also.
Sure, Billy. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I'm Val Applewhite, state senator for Cumberland County. I also served on the Fayetteville City Council years ago. But I think my primary reason is that I'm a mother. I raised 2 boys here in Cumberland County, and I've seen too many of their friends shot, killed due to gun violence. I will have to say that Fawn Dockery's story is really what really got me focused in on this issue again. Um, I think the frustration for me comes in with a lack of accountability, particularly on parents. While we certainly need funding in the legislature, you are doing yeoman's work, but I think that there needs to be more accountability for our parents and consequences. I think it's the family in Michigan. I think for the first time, the young man who went on a school shooting and their parents are going to jail. So part while my heart is into it, I think that we have to put some responsibility and accountability with parents, even though we have the mental health issues, we have all of those things happening. I really want more accountability. Thank you for having me.
Stephen, thank you, Senator. And I know the most of y'all probably saw in the headlines that the Hedingham shooting that occurred here in Raleigh, where 5 people lost their lives to a juvenile that got access to his father's guns. The father was also charged in that situation. But as we know, in the state of North Carolina, that's just a misdemeanor charge. And so that unlike the Michigan case, where I believe those parents got charged with felonies, in North Carolina, that was a very low level misdemeanor that the parent was charged with. So I know that you've been working on legislation to kind of bring that accountability up, and we'll talk about that as we go through the panel. So the next question I have for the group, for the panel is, despite really strong evidence that safe storage works and makes a significant difference in reducing gun violence incidents in our communities, only 54% of gun owners say they practice safe storage in their homes. Why do you think that is? And so I'll start with Mark on this one, because I know you probably have heard this from people in your local community. What do you hear, Mark? Why do people not do safe storage?
Yeah, I feel like there's a few reasons behind this, but it often comes up. It's usually just a lack of awareness and understanding of the risk. I feel like some people, they may say that, quote unquote, their guns are safe enough because they're hidden, or because they trust their kids not to touch them. Others may feel that securing a firearm makes it harder for them to access when needed. That's a really big one right there. So sometimes it's just that people haven't had these conversations, and so that they don't realize how easy and essential it is to improve firearm safety in their homes. Um, I think education is really a bridge in that gap right there, and that's why exactly we're here today to bring that awareness and that education out to the community.
Thanks, Mark. Sheriff, anything that you would add to that? I know you probably hear from citizens that haven't locked up their firearms, and those firearms have ended up being stolen or in the wrong hands. Why did they tell you that they don't lock up their firearms?
Well, people, before we've listened to have said one, they didn't think they needed to. They thought the gun was safe in the cars. They've actually forgot to take the gun out the car when they went in it for the night. Forgot to lock the car, or better yet, we've actually had them cars locked and the cars broken into and the guns are stolen. So people just think that it's inside a vehicle is secure, but we tell them all the time it's not secure. You need to put a lock on it and or bring it inside, especially when you come in for the rest of the day. In and out, different locations, going back and forth, it's hard to take it in and out. I get that, but make sure it is secure. So those are some of the issues that we hear, concerns that we have, to make sure that we can get it marketed out where people understand. Lock your guns up, lock them up, and secure them. When you come out the car at night for the day or whatever, bring the gun in with you.
And Fawn, anything that you would add to that? Would any other reasons that you're hearing that people don't do safe storage?
From personally, from the events that we've had, some of the responses that I've gotten from parents, from teachers, and I guess some type of shame has been associated with it, and guilt. But they pulled me to the side, or they messaged me direct message, and it's like, man, I went home and I locked up my guns. I told my husband, or I went home and told my wife, this ain't secure here. So to me, what I'm hearing a lot is just they don't feel the direct effect of it. So they don't see the need. And a common word is, hey, they think their guns are safe enough in that dresser until they hear our story and they're like, okay, no, it's not. No, it's not. So
Great. Thank you, Fawn. Anything you would add, Senator Applewhite, to that?
Well, I'll say that, as a kid, I always went through my parents' stuff when they weren't there. I was looking for cookies or something. What's in their room? It's something magical about your parents' stuff when they're not there. So you always found things. And I think sometimes if we think about how we were with children, as children, there's no safe space in your house. But I think that sometimes they are not. May not have been personally affected by that. I was speaking with Chief Braden not too long ago, Chief of Police here in Fayetteville, and he was telling me about a dad who came home, laid down on the couch to take a quick nap, and put his gun on the coffee table, and his 4-year-old got the gun and shot and killed the father.
Mm.
So lives are changed forever. So maybe it's just that it hasn't impacted them personally. It happens to other people and not us. Mhm.
Right. Thank you. So the next question I have was, what do we constitute is safe storage? I think some people think, like the senator was just saying, that putting it in the dresser drawer, I've put it out of sight, therefore it's stored safely. So what truly constitutes safe storage when you think about safe storage? So Mark, I'll start with you again on this one. When you think of safe storage, what do you actually think of as actually being a safely stored firearm?
So when you say safe storage, I feel like it usually means that you're locking your firearms up, so that only the owner or trusted adults have access to them. Ideally, having them in a gun safe or using some kind of locking device would be uh, constitute as safe storage. And just like Senator Applewhite says, like, just kids are curious and they are very resourceful, and they get into a lot of stuff. And it only takes just one moment for them to discover an unsecured firearm. So just just putting the gun out of sight and not securely locked is just not enough. So it just needs to be out of out of their reach, locked up in a safe, locked up with some kind of devices. They've got amazing things on Amazon where you can buy biometric, gun safes, super futuristic, easy access. So to me, that's what I feel like constitutes as a safe storage.
Thank you, Mark. Anything that you would add to that, Sheriff, about what actually constitutes safe storage?
Yeah, I'll go back to what Mr. Gooden said. Actually, safe storage, putting in a safe, that's the best. That's the best way. Putting in the safe, make sure the safe is locked. I actually have guns in my safe, and I actually have some locks on the guns in the safe. And hoping, hoping. And I don't have any small kids. And I don't have any small kids come by the house or anything like that. So I'm hoping that all that stuff works for me. But being a law enforcement official, we always, all my guns don't have locks on them. Because I always have to make sure that I'm prepared at home as well. So I just try to make sure I stay on the A game.
Fawn, anything that you would add to that? What would constitute the definition of what you would actually consider to be safe storage? I know in Genesis's case, the young man that shot Genesis actually got the gun from a gun safe, but the gun safe was set with a combination of 0000, and so it was really easy to get into it, right?
Oh,
Right. So I can say what is not safe storage, and that's a shoebox in the closet or taking a gun from a child and putting it on the shelf. It's not safe gun storage. And I won't hound those 2 points that they did because I think Sheriff and Mark make really good points. But I'll add that as a gun owner, if you know you have young children in your house or children coming over, even having that conversation about guns and safety and the reality of guns and the dangers of them, to me, that constitutes safe gun storage also. Because there are a lot of homes where children's frequent with gun owners, and some of the same children are playing video games where they're shooting and killing and desensitized to it, and they don't really know the difference. And a simple conversation with that child to explain to them the dangers and the realities and consequences of a real weapon, I think would constitute safe gun storage.
Right. So, Senator, I'll pose the question to you because I know this is kind of a tough one as far as when we look at the legislative requirements. If we're going to increase accountability for parents, for example, for safe storage, what would you consider in that legislation to be considered this is safely stored versus not safely stored?
Oh, I don't know what the bill would look like, but I will say that, with the legislation, I pulled out one of the bills that I was a co-sponsor on, SB 849. I think the bigger picture is that legislators have to understand that it affects them too. Whatever the narrative, whatever we hash out, what the definition is. But when we have good bills, they die in committee. We put a lot of work into these bills that, this even has about veterans use, about the permit. It's got to get out of committee. And I think the only way the laws actually change to have a definition of what constitutes safe storage under the law, none of it matters unless we have the votes for it to pass. So I'm very interested in your slide that says, I saw Cumberland there, that it's a blue. Let's talk politics. It's a blue area, but many of the areas are red. And the representatives won't let this legislation move out of committee. So whatever the definition is going to be, it doesn't matter until we can get enough people to pass it.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll ask this question to all of you, and I know you were a veteran yourself, Senator, so maybe you can help us. One of the things that we're trying to do is make sure, obviously, if we're trying to get safe storage, we want to get to people that are gun owners themselves. So who do you all think are real credible messengers that can reach out to the local community of gun owners in your local community that would be credible messengers that we should include in this campaign moving forward. So, Senator, I'll start with you. I know as a veteran, I assume when you were in the Air Force, y'all had pretty tight rules about how those guns were handled on the base, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you wanted to end your career quick, you have a problem with a weapon that will get you in trouble real quick. I think that maybe even reaching out to our churches, right? To have our churches sponsor events like this, but also I think with young people, um, I'm an old lady. I don't have street cred, right? So sometimes we need young men, young women who have been impacted by the system, right? To have that conversation with young people. Billy, you have great presentations, but when I really want to reach community, I find someone else that speaks the language and have them in the space. Fawn is doing a great job. He was at one of the events that I had, and it really resonated with the audience. So if we're speaking to parents, have the right person speaking to them. But when we're speaking to kids, have kids that have been in the juvenile justice system. I think would be very beneficial.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Fawn, are there other people that you think we need to engage in this conversation that would be credible messengers in the local community about spreading the idea of safe storage?
I think Senator Applewhite made a good point. And that's one of the things that I have noticed too is having, I guess, the appropriate person who can engage that audience, that you're addressing with it. I have a friend actually. She's actually Genesis' godmom, and she's a social worker. And since everything had happened with Jen, she's told me and my wife, she sat down with her. She said, I sit down with veterans all the time, and at the VA, and ask them, hey, are your guns locked up? And some of them, she has to advise them because of her job and their mental health state. You don't need to be around a weapon. Hey, make sure you're locking your gun up. And their response, hey, my guns are fine. I need my guns. And it's like, again, I don't know what that would look like, but maybe on that social work line, having somebody in that space to address the issue more directly when you're considering veterans. So
Yeah. So I'll turn it to Mark now. And so we've heard a couple of ideas about some messengers that would be effective. What is the message that you think would be more? Is there a more effective way to spread the message about safe storage to local community members that may have concerns about making sure that they have a gun for protection of their home? How do we reach those people? Do you think, Mark?
I'm sorry, Deputy, you were cutting in and out. What was the question?
Okay, I'm sorry. So I was just saying, what type of messaging do you think would work well in local communities to get this message of safe storage out?
Oh, gotcha. Um, I feel like
I think we've
I
lost
think
Mark.
while he's trying to get together, want me to work on that,
Yeah,
please?
Sheriff, if you'll,
He's working on that.
yes, sir.
So Mark, you come back in on it and get ready if you can. But what I'm going to do, I believe in public service announcements. I believe in PSAs and billboards and old school things. There used to be a public service announcement back in the early 70s and 80s. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. And then there's another one, the Negro College Foundation. When those PSAs was going forward, it took residence in the mindset and the hearts and the spirit of people. And then as we noticed that the in the black community college tuition or better yet college attendance began to rise because of the commercials or the public service announcement. The more people hear it, the more they're going to get it. The less they hear it, the less they're going to think about it. They'll think about it, but not as much as they would. They hear it all the time. You have to make people tired, sick and tired of hearing things. And then they'll say, you know what? I get it. I get it. So I believe the public service announcements would be great to put out there. Something from the sheriff's office to different organizations they can do their live coverage in their own organizations and push it out to their social media outlets. I think that would be good to help get things done because we're up on the budget, and we know that the state of North Carolina don't get no money towards budget when it comes to things that matters. So we need to make sure that we can put things out there and run with it. That's what I think.
Great. Thank you, Sheriff. Thanks, Sheriff. And Mark, I don't know if we got you back or not. But
I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Lovely Wi-Fi that we have out here. So I think I'm going to fall back onto the program that we did with Live Light Genesis. I like the shock and awe aspect of it. I like to, pull the Band-Aid off, pull the rug out. I want you to see exactly what we're getting into. I want you to see what this does for you, not only, the families that are affected, what it does to the victims, what it does to yourself, what it looks like afterwards. So I believe in the program that we did. I'm even working with Crystal right now to formulate, a whole entire 16-week program where we're doing this. But again, so the previous programs that we did, we had our trauma surgeons out there and we went over different various, injuries that you'd experience. People were disgusted, people were mind blown, people were interested and that's what I want you to understand. I want you to understand what the ramifications are of what happens when you don't secure your weapons, when they get in the hands of, these teenagers or, anybody, what does this do to a person? So, again, so that's my spill on it is I feel like always a shock and awe thing. I feel like we have sugarcoated enough of this topic and it's honestly time to get real about it.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So I'll move to an issue that I think is really pertinent in society today, and that's school safety. I know I have 2 daughters that attend schools, and there's nothing that is more disturbing and traumatizing to the school environment than the school having to move into lockdown. And that when that occurs, just the trauma that occurs among the young people in that school, the teachers, the staff at that school, the parents at the school that are associated with the kids at that school. My wife also works at an elementary school. I can tell you this is one of my greatest fears is that one of these school shootings that we've seen across the country would come to one of our local communities. And so I'll just have y'all speak real quickly about what a safe storage got to do with school safety, and how do you see that play out, and how can this help in that effort? So, Senator, I don't know if you want to go first and give us kind of your insight on that.
Yes. I think that this whole conversation, if we dial it back, we have to look at the mental health and the trauma that is happening in our homes. A lot, when I speak with teachers and counselors, a lot of what our children are bringing to school is a result of what they are seeing in their homes. I've been racking my brain to figure out how do we get to that base? How do we help our homes and our families become healthier so the children are healthier? And as the gentleman said, there's no amount of money that's going to come out of the General Assembly for mental health or for schools or anything that's going to totally fix it. And I may not be answering your question precisely, but I think that's part of the problem. And overall, it's the socioeconomic situation that affects our children. Cumberland County is a tier 1, high poverty and high distress. No matter everything that we're talking about, if these kids don't have resources and money, I've had my door kicked in twice. I've been robbed twice. I know it's been kids, right? They're going to continue. They don't care about locks, it's the socioeconomic impact that affects them in their homes, and they bring that to school. So whatever approach we have, I think it has to be holistic and take into account the environment. So I maybe didn't answer your question, but I just wanted to say that.
No, I think that's an excellent point, and runs into the next question that I have. But I'm gonna give others a chance to answer the school safety issue. Anything, Sheriff? How do you think the safe storage issue affects school safety?
Well, I'm normally not too puzzled. I've been puzzled with the schools for years now, and just trying to get it out there. I just think that we just keep pushing out there the necessity or the need or the importance it is of keeping the guns locked up and the parents aware of how important it is for them to know where their guns at all times and lock and secure it up. These teenagers, just like the senator said, you know, pretty much they don't care. They don't care. And so I just think the education piece starts at home. It does, but also unfortunately, but the truth, reality told, it ends in the court system. We want it to end in the court system. We don't want it to get there, but don't want them in the grave either. So we rather for it to end in the court system where they understand that the consequences are real, And I don't think that a lot of the teenagers and the courts have given enough. And I may get some blowback on this, but that's fine. I don't think that the system has done enough justice um, to get the kids rehabilitated the way that they need to be rehabilitated. Slap them on the wrist and tell them it's okay, you're gonna go home, be house arrest for 60 days, 90 days, or put them on probation for 6 months or whatever, and nothing goes with it. Just sometimes just don't work, you know. So that's what I think. I might not have answered the question, but I try to bring it to the point where reality of it is bringing the kids to understand that consequences are there.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheriff. So I'll start with Mark on this one because you probably saw it as a paramedic riding on the back of an ambulance or in the ambulance and working with folks. We've seen a mental health crisis in our society. We saw it definitely balloon after the pandemic. How does mental health and safe storage intersect? Where do you see that intersection? And I'll say this from the juvenile justice side. Last year, if you look at the kids that were committed to a juvenile justice facility, we only had one child that didn't have a mental health diagnosis. Only one that entered entered into our committed status in a juvenile justice facility. 50% of them had 5 or more mental health diagnoses, and so that's true with our young kids, and it's also true with our veterans. We see a lot of our veterans that are having mental health problems that are coming back, that have served in foreign wars, that are coming back with mental health challenges also. And so we know that 60% of veterans that commit suicide use firearms to do that with. So how does safe storage and mental health kind of interact with each other? And I'll start with Mark on that one.
Yeah, certainly. Firearms, again, they're easily accessible because they're not locked up, right? So a person that's, having a type of crisis, so if we just limit that access to that firearm, that can be life-saving to them. That could literally give them the critical pause to think and to get them the time to seek help from somebody or to step out, first to seek that help from somebody and step in or offer some support. It can, again, essentially, when you're in a crisis, you're going 100. You're not thinking about anything at all. You're just thinking about that action. You're thinking about just spiraling down. So if we hit the brakes on it, and if we lock those guns up, it will give them a little bit of time to think about what they're doing. and hopefully seek that help out. And definitely with our veterans, I've seen and gone to a lot of veterans that have been in crisis, and I've walked into that house and I've seen literally hundreds of guns in the corner that they easily could have picked up and they could have used on themselves. So, just like Senator Applewhite said, there's a need. There's a need for help in this community. There's a need for help for mental health, and it's just lacking. It's lacking in here, and yeah, there's there's so much I could talk about mental health because it touches a spot, but yeah.
Thank you, Mark. And Fawn, I'll throw this one over to you because I know at one of the events that I went to with you that you really talked about how in the African American community, especially, that it's kind of been one of those things that we don't ask for help, especially mental health help. And so can you kind of talk about that and then how this relates to safe storage also?
So I was going to meet with City Council at City Hall, and I had just got done meeting with City Council, and I was walking out, and there was a group of ladies there who had just met with someone, and they dropped the card, and I seen it was the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and I ran up to them and said, "Hey, this one of y'all cards?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "Well," I told them about the Live Like Genesis project and how I would like to partner with them, and of course get some evidence and get some resources and access. And they were asking about me, and I told them who I was, and I gave them a little of my background. Told them I was raised in Falcon Children's Home, and they asked me about therapy, and I told them I had never been in therapy until my daughter was shot, and I had been in a children's home from 6th grade to 11th grade. So all of those years, coming from the trauma of my home to going into a totally different environment, and still, while I was providing resources, I was not providing mental health. And not just there, but even now, as we go out and advocate, I run into that crisis where I've gotten phone calls from people who just, it's like they don't know how to even look at the issue. Who do I go to? What counselor? How do I know is a good counselor? And if we don't address mental health issues specifically, especially in children, like conflict resolution, that's going to continue to intersect with safe gun storage. And I'll say directly, there was a story a few months ago of a child who had an issue with a bully at the school, a local school, and the child embarrassed the bully. So the bully was messing with the child. The child couldn't take it no more, said something to the bully. The bully got embarrassed, went home, brought a gun back the next day in his book bag, and was going to shoot the kid in the hallway. I know this because a teacher intersected, stopped the kid, and when they got the kid down to the office and was talking to the kid, what was going on, he said, "Man, that kid embarrassed me." I said, "Well, what were you going to do?" He said, "I was going to shoot him," which goes back to your statistics on this kid having access to a firearm, but also, again, those mental health issues. So he didn't know how to handle his conflict. So his idea was, oh, I can get a gun, so I'm gonna take a gun and that's how I'm gonna fix it. So again, through specific experiences, that's directly how they intersect consistently if we don't address mental health issues.
Thank you, Fawn. Senator Applewhite, anything you would want to add on the mental health discussion side of it? I know that we passed Medicaid expansion, and that should help with expanding some of these services. But other thoughts that you have on how mental health and safe storage kind of intersect?
Well, if I could just comment on the veterans piece, because suicide is, there's a statistic every few minutes a veteran takes his own life. And it is a mental health crisis. When you talk about, African Americans not accepting mental health counseling, it's the same thing in the military. You're weak, you're supposed to have it together all the time. But there's a lot of trauma, PTSD, that veterans clearly go through. And we know how to be smart enough to get out of the military without saying I have a mental health problem. I was looking at our legislation, and part of it was, to prevent veterans that have a dishonorable discharge from, having a permit, but honorably discharged veterans have guns, and we know how to fool the system and get out. The problem becomes the off ramp from active duty to becoming a civilian is hard. It was hard for me. I don't, you're totally different world. The culture is different. You don't know these people. Maybe you can't find a job. It's a whole lot of things. And here in Cumberland County, when we have people that are in special forces, special operations, these folks are really in it. So this is a federal issue with the VA. We've got to have a better off ramp and follow up once you get out of the service and you are now isolated amongst people that are not like me. All right. So I think that's part of the mental health issue for veterans. And on a federal level, the VA budget is being cut too. So there's less resources for veterans when they get out. So it does come down to resources as well, and safe storage. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. And Sheriff, I don't know, I mean, I know you see this mental health problems like we do in juvenile justice. You see it probably at your jail also. I often say that jails end up being the last resort for a lot of people that are suffering from mental health problems. Anything that you would add on the mental health discussion and how it intersects with safe storage?
Yeah, first I wanted to acknowledge what Fawn and Senator Apple White spoke on. The mental health piece, and as you said, Mr. Lassiter, I see it in the jails. But hold on, let me make sure you understand. Not only do I see it within our jails, but I also see it within the people that we work with. You know, and I tell people the jails is just another uh, piece of the community. But what about the men and women that we work with? That have passed the FMRT to get in, the brains test, and then after 2 or 3 years, things began to go wrong or home began to falter. I mean, just all kind of stuff. So the sheriff's office, we read a book, and we've been discussing this book. The body keeps the score, and it's by the author Koch, I think it is Kolk. And I heard from him, and he said he was in the group home from 6th grade to the 11th grade. Just to think of the fact that you're not being able to talk about your mental health experience, because if you talk about it or if you get counseling, you're weak. And that's what was told when we was kids coming up in our community. Don't you go back and tell it. Don't you take it out of this house. You be tough, and this is what you better do. If you don't do this, you'll sissy this and this and that. Just real talk. But mental health affects every one of us sitting on this panel. That's real talk. We all have something, we have dealt with something, or we will deal with something. The goal of it is to make sure that we are man enough or woman enough to be able to get the necessary help that we need. Law enforcement, I'm done. Law enforcement, I tell people, law enforcement officers take their lives daily. Daily. And it hurts all across this nation. Daily. And we make sure that here at the Sheriff's Office of Guilford County, that they know we have help for them to get it done. But that mental health is, man, that's just a broad. I could talk all day on it and until tomorrow and the next week. It's so broad. But we need, it's a federal funding issue where we need the institutions back open with the doctors and the counselors and the therapists and the beds to help get the people to help. That's what we need. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but that's what I had to drop off.
Thank you, Sheriff. Well, I think we're at 2:10, so we're getting close to the end here. But I want to make sure that if there's something else that each of y'all would like to add to the conversation, that I give you a chance to do that. So, Fawn, I'll start with you. If there's one other message that you would want the people to hear today that are on this call, we've got obviously policymakers, but also a lot of people from the general public that are part of the discussion or listening in on YouTube today. If there's one other thing that you would want to make sure people to hear, especially something about how you've been touched by this issue that you would want them to hear, if you could share that with them now.
Well, I would like to say, first of all, thank you, Billy, and the North Carolina Safe Program for partnering with us and inviting me on this panel. It's been a breath of fresh air to work with NC Safe, because the how-to manuals, the resources, they're so practical. There's not a lot of red tape. And in what we're doing in the community, boots on the ground, we're seeing people who need resources and they don't really understand red tape. And we want to be that bridge on that line. So NC Safe has helped us do that on so many levels, so consistently. I just want to say that as the president of the Live Like Genesis Project, we're going to continue to push forward. We're going to continue to partner with those who are wanting to address the issues that we address today. And I'm humbly grateful to be in this conversation and to hear the wisdom that each and every one has presented. I walk away from here a better person, more educated, and more equipped to continue to do what we do for this community, for safe gun storage. So thank you.
Thank you, Fawn, and thank you for dedicating your life to this issue. I'm sorry that you were brought into this issue because of a tragedy, but I appreciate your advocacy and the work that you've done so far to partner with NC Safe through your foundation with Live Like Genesis. You truly are a remarkable person, and we appreciate you being part of the panel today. Mark, if there was one other message that you'd want to send to people that are on this call today, what would that be?
I think I would simply put that safe storage of your firearms is simple. It's pretty much an impactful way that we can protect all of the people that we love, and prevent those avoidable tragedies. Um, I think that it's been brought up a lot of times that it's about us taking away people's rights. It's not about that. It's not. We're not limiting anyone's rights about having them lock up their guns. It's simply just about us being empowered and taking those responsible steps of securing our firearms so that no one loses their life. And yeah, that's pretty much the big message I want to lay out.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the service that you do each and every day to protect your community and to prevent these incidents from occurring in our communities. And thank you for being a partner on the NC Safe campaign, especially down in Cumberland County. But you've been a voice for other places across the state too. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, sir.
Sheriff, anything that you would want to add as your final message on this topic of safe storage in communities across the state of North Carolina?
Yeah, I do. I want to say, first of all, on the awesome job that North Carolina Safe is doing. I'm so very grateful for what you all are doing as a panel, as a task force. I'm grateful and honored to be able to be a part of this task force. I really am. And my goal is to be able to do what you would need me to do as an individual. Continue to pass the word out is phenomenal. I think the more we can share with the faith organizations, the other recreation places, but yet the more we could talk about it, the more we talk about it in just general conversation versus just having to make sure we have a room for the people that want to hear our voices. I think the more that we talk about it in a general conversation, the more it becomes more important and more relevant it becomes. Well, people will listen to the voices. It's like there was used to be a commercial that said, when E.F. Hutton speak, people listen. I believe when we talk about the lives and the guns, safe guns, and the reasons why they need to be put in place, and we put somebody's lively experience behind it, they will listen. So I just thank y'all for the awesome work that you're doing.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate that, and appreciate you being part of the panel today, and being a voice on the Safer Schools Task Force that you're a member of, also, and all the insight that you provided today. Senator Applewhite, is there another ending message that you'd like to provide to the people that are on the call today?
I would, and I want to thank Fawn Dockery. This is going to be the first time I'm going to be on a panel with you and not cry. But he gave me gosh. I had the opportunity to go to his home and sit with his wife and his daughter and to see his daughter's bedroom. Thank you and the pictures in your house. Thank you for allowing me into your space to see how Genesis lived. My message to everyone is, whether we're talking about funding for SAFE, funding for mental health, legislation, I cannot do that alone. We cannot do that alone. And what I committed to Fawn and to his wife is that when we have legislation, whoever's listening, you've got to lobby. You've got to lobby hard to every member in the House and in the Senate. You've got to show up at the General Assembly. We've got to say, the department that covers this, you gave them a mandate, but you didn't give them funding. If you don't lobby hard, these bills die in committee. This money will not be in the budget. I'm saying emailing, I'm calling. You are coming to the General Assembly, you are knocking on doors. And when we get back in session, I've invited Fawn and his wife to come in the Senate. And they're going to hear her story, because I'm going to put it on every senator's desk and have him stand up and say, this is what safe storage is about. So that is my message. I cannot do this alone. And I am begging you to join me to fight for the resources we need to save our children. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for being part of the discussion, and thanks for your advocacy on this issue. Caroline, are there any questions? I know we had time maybe for one question or two from the public. Is there any questions from the public that came in?
I had not seen where anybody entered any questions into the chat, but if anybody would like to now, certainly I'm glad to read those to you.
Okay, thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to real quick share one more time the QR code for the Safe Storage NC Safe campaign. And so I encourage folks that are on the call today, if you don't know about NC Safe, to go to the NC Safe website, which is just ncsafe.org, or you can just scan the QR code that you see there in front of you, and that will take you directly to the website and get you all the awesome resources that have been produced through the campaign. We've got some really good materials that are coming down the pike in the near future from NC Safe. We're actually going to highlight several of the stories of people in local communities, Fawn Dockery being one of those. But we've got some stories from other folks that have had tragedy due to not safely storing their firearms, and some people that did safely store their firearms, and it turned out that saved the life of their child. And we're going to have some of those testimonials that will be on the website soon and part of the campaign, but also other materials that are free that you can download in your local community to help us spread this message about NC Safe and get the word out about how safe storage truly can save lives in our local communities. I just would want people to think about this as you're thinking about safe storage. This year in the state of North Carolina alone, we've lost 13 kids under the age of 10 due to unintentional deaths due to guns. And so all of those cases were preventable. There were cases where a kid found a gun either in their parents' house or in the glove compartment of their parents' car. All of those are preventable incidents by simply using safe storage techniques in your home, including locks and removing the ammo from the firearm and safely putting that gun in a safe storage device. On the NC Safe website, you can email us if you're interested in getting gun locks also. We are distributing those across the state of North Carolina. And so that's a free resource that's available through the campaign if you would like those materials. And so if there are no questions from the public, I'll turn it back over to you, Caroline, for any closing remarks from the committee as a whole.
No questions, Deputy Secretary Lassiter. I just want to thank all of our participants, profoundly thank our panelists for their time and their willingness to discuss this topic. I think you're right on. The more we talk about it, the more we can raise awareness, the easier it is for everybody to move this issue forward. I do want to say that a recording of this it was live streamed on YouTube, but a recording will also be available. Just need to Google DPS YouTube, and you'll be able to find it there if you want to share with your networks. We will push it out through our networks as well, but we'd love for you to do that. Thank you so much for your time today. And that's it.
Thank y'all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.